We'll get right
Morning,
into
Chris.
it.
I can
Thank
hear you.
Okay, thanks. I can hear you, Gisette.
Phyllis, you're live.
Okay.
I cannot hear the room.
All right, I'm calling the meeting to order
Me neither.
at 8:31. Good morning, everybody. Our first order of business, it just went away, is Citizens Commons. We have 100 citizens here. This will be a long day. No, just one.
Just here to listen. Thank you.
No comment? Okay. So that moves us right into agenda item number 3, approval of the last minutes. Douglas submitted the minutes from the April 2nd, April 21st meetings in the handout package. Anybody, any comments to those minutes?
Oh, actually, I did, if I can find it now.
We give you 1 minute. Okay,
Yeah, it was.
you're running very
It was
tight.
a quote that didn't make sense, and I think it was a spelling check.
Do you want to just send it to me?
I can
And I'll-
just send
I'll
it
do
to
that.
you. It's-
Okay,
It's a typo.
Yeah, and I couldn't figure out what the word was supposed to have been.
very good. Thank you.
Okay, can I get a motion to move those minutes?
I second, I make a motion.
Okay,
Second.
all right. Anybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, moved. Then we have under number 4, old business, 2 old business items. The first one is analysis of, the analysis progress report from Forth Olson. I see Forth Olson is online. So at this point in time, ladies and gentlemen from Forth Olson, we would just hand over to you. Is that okay?
So I was hearing,
Okay, now we can hear you guys now. Okay, good.
I think we may have had ourselves muted. Sorry about that. Good morning, everybody. You've got the Beach Preservation Committee here. We can see all of you in your small cubicles. Hopefully you all can see us as
Only
well.
Chris is in this big office.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually, I'm a long way from the office right now. So, but here I'm connected to you guys.
Okay.
So we will,
I'm traveling today. So you may hear some background noise from me. And I'll try to work through that because I'm actually traveling by boat right now. So.
Okay.
very good. So we were hoping to get just kind of a status report, an update on how your project is progressing and see if there's,
Okay.
could be some questions and answers, but if you don't mind, if you just kind of give us a status update on how it's going, that would be great.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Again, I'll kick this off. This is Chris Creed, and I have with me my colleagues Zach Bedell, Evan Haig, and Sydney Goodman. This is the team who is working through this project, and so far we're continuing to work through the data sets that are available, including the beach data sets, and importantly the offshore Barra area data sets, because these are tools that will ultimately be used in alternative formulation when we're looking at what the long-term life cycles are going to be for these projects, and what type of resources you will need to accommodate your goals. Most importantly, what we want to talk to you guys about this morning is this definition of a minimum beach. We continue to try to get our hands around this topic, and what we would like to do is I'll wrap up. I'm going to turn it over to Zach, Sydney, and Evan to give a few updates on a couple of topics, and then we'll jump on this minimum beach condition topic. And ideally, what we would like to hear from the committee today are ideas about goals and desires for a minimum condition, because that is super important for establishing the baseline of a program as we move into the future. And I'll explain more of that when I get to those slides. But we do have some slides. And Sydney, I'm going to share my screen because I did make some edits very early this morning to the slides. And so I'll share those and we can work through it. And when people, the respective both folks who want the slides, just tell me when to advance. So here we go. I'm not going to share the screen so you guys will see. Yeah, so this is just, quick little update for this. And here are some of the topics that we would like to discuss. So Zach, I'll turn it over to you.
We see it now.
Yeah, you can see that.
Do you see it?
We do.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so again, we're just going to go through briefly touch base on what we've been working on so far, and then get more, as Chris said, into the discussion about the minimum healthy beach condition. So, Chris, you can go ahead to the next slide. And Sydney, if you'll just briefly update on the data sets you and Evan have been reviewing so far.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So what we have received so far from both the city and CSE in our analysis are some of the aerial photography. We've been doing some just overall comparisons of different features on the beach using the different aerials along the entire island. So we've been looking at that. We've been looking at survey data, so that includes beach monitoring surveys from the previous years, as well as the surveys that have been used in the 2026 project. So those are the ones that were shared as part of the bid advertisement. We've also been looking at some of the geotechnical information of some of the previous and existing borrow areas offshore, as well as the volumes available in in all of those. And then lastly, we've been looking at some of the previous reports that CSE has put together for the city and looking at the different volume change rates along the different parts of the island, as well as what some of the previous definitions of minimum healthy beach condition have been. So that's about everything we have looked at so far, and I'll turn it over to Evan on the next slide to go over some of the geotechnical information.
Sure. So yeah, this slide here, we've been reviewing the geotechnical and borrow area information for the past renourishments in those reports and those permitting endeavors, and then also recent reports by CSE evaluating borrow areas and sand sources. So you'll see here on this map, looking through all the previous reports, we see that borrow areas A, B, C, and F have been fully excavated and were fully excavated in the previous renourishments. Borrow area E, there in orange, is partially excavated. Some of the material in that borrow area was used in a past renourishment, and then D and G were permitted but were not used, and there's a little bit of sand in those two borrow areas. Number 1 there in the blue is what's going to be used for this upcoming renourishment. And then looking through CSE's reports, we see that they've identified borrow areas 1 through 5 as future sources, with 1 being used in this upcoming renourishment. And they estimate that in borrow areas 1 through 5, there's up to 25 million cubic yards of material. And we know that not all of that may necessarily end up being recoverable. Number 1, due to the ability of dredges and what they're just not able to recover all of the material in a borrow area. And number 2, as you get into more of the design level, you may find that some of the material isn't as good as you thought it was, or there's cultural resources that you have to avoid. But there's certainly plenty in there for a few renourishments. There's insufficient volume in the partially excavated and unexcavated areas for a full renourishment, but some of that material could be used to supplement future renourishments. And we also see, looking through all the past reports and everything, that the sediment from these offshore borrow areas has historically been compatible with the native beach on Isle of Palms. Next slide.
Yeah, well, I'm going to add, I'd just like to round this out why this is important, because beach management into the future is a 2-part puzzle, right? It is, what is your long-term need for sand, which is the part that Sydney has been working on, of baseline conditions and what future management or sand placement volumes would be to maintain your desired conditions, and what would that volume need as you go into the future. And then you have to look at what is available to you. And you look at, and when we get into the cost analysis, it is what is available, where is it, because the distance to those sources are of interest, because the farther the sources are from the placement area, the more expensive it gets. So right now it appears that there's a good bit of material available, but we don't know yet how long this serves the community into the future. So it'll be a conversation that we have in the future once we get through our alternatives. And maybe CSC has already kind of looked at this in a very broad scale, but we're going to look at it in the context of what is your future needs with other measures we may implement, whether it be structures or other more proactive management practices around some of that shoal management on the north end of the island. So again, we're just developing background information that all the pieces that we're going to put together into these alternatives that we can start looking at in a much greater detail. So I will move on from those comments, and I think we turn it over back to Zach.
Yeah. So as part of this this assessment, we will be reaching out to the state and federal regulators. And last week, we had the opportunity to meet with one of the Charleston District's project managers. And we discussed with her at a pretty high level kind of what the approaches that we're taking for this beach alternatives analysis, and went through a few of the topics that we discussed with you. At the north end of the island, one of these broader ones is shoal manipulation, creative shoal manipulation with beach renourishment. And so some of the things we learned out of this discussion with her, and some of which we are familiar with, is that the maximum duration that the Charleston District will issue a permit for is 10 years, and that was pretty cut and dry. And from our experience, typical permits have usually been for one-time actions. So that means you get one shot at doing your beach renourishment project and one shot at doing the borrow site excavation for that. But what the project manager at the district had noted to us is that she believes that there's some potential opportunity to work on conditioning permits for multiple maintenance events. And so what that allows for is, for instance, an initial nourishment project under a certain permit. And if there's enough time between that and when the city would undertake a subsequent maintenance event, you could potentially get two events out of a single permit exercise. It also gives you the opportunity to be able to respond in any case should any emergency needs come up. What she also informed us was that the Charleston District recently issued what's called the South Carolina Programmatic Biological Opinion. And so when permitting these different coastal projects, if there is a chance that species listed under the Endangered Species Act, whether it's a threatened or endangered, could be impacted by the project, then it needs to be reviewed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. But because there are so many types of projects that are they're the same types of projects over and over again, offshore dredging and beach renourishment, they have found that they can find regulatory efficiencies by issuing what are called programmatic biological opinions, that as long as your projects fall within a certain set of rules, it cuts out a lot of the review that's needed. So she made us aware that this was recently issued, and we'll be looking more into that about what types of projects this would cover and what types of requirements that would fall. And lastly, we talked to her about the Corps' takes on coastal structures, and she very broadly said that the Corps doesn't have any inherent restrictions against oceanfront coastal structures. It would be the state and a local decision about whether those would be authorized. So we're aware that there are several examples in South Carolina of oceanfront structures. So we believe that there's possibilities related to this, but that'll be something more to dig in with the state. So lastly, the state wasn't at that meeting. They were unavailable, but I did receive a follow-up from them late last week that they would like to meet with us in mid to late May. So we'll be looking to have a meeting with them over in the coming weeks. That's it for me, Chris.
Thanks, Zach. And I'd just like to kind of round this out about that programmatic biological opinion. That applies specifically to beach nourishment, just typical, plain repetitive type beach nourishment where we're going to an offshore bore site that has been used previously or near the ones that have been used previously and be able to place that sand on the beach. I think CSE probably has accessed the use of this programmatic logical opinion for the efficiencies that exist or that you're enjoying and getting these permits a little quicker than is normal. However, if we start looking at some of these more creative and more proactive project approaches that may include a structure or other types of dredging that is not specifically anticipated in that biological opinion, it is entirely possible and very likely that we would have to go back in the formal consultation with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service when we try to permit those things. Not an insurmountable task. It just takes more time. So that's just the programmatic logical opinion does not address all the potential things that we're talking about. And in each of the alternatives that we lay out, we will talk about the pros and cons of each of those from a regulatory perspective. Any questions so far? Any discussion?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to what we're here for, really, the nuts and bolts of what we need to do. And I'll explain at a very high level of how we view development of a beach management program. And that the first step is deciding what are the minimum conditions that you want to maintain under all circumstances. And where are those relative to what the conditions you have now, where do those exist? And how much material does it take to establish that baseline condition? So the Corps of Engineers in their civil works planning process views civil works beach shore protection projects very similarly. They call it the design beach. And then beyond that, they use what they call advanced nourishment, advanced fill, to maintain those conditions. And in the simplest project, you have a pretty uniform erosion rate along the entire beach. You build a minimum beach condition or the design beach, and then you place a given amount of advanced nourishment seaward of that design beach for the renourishment interval that they determine is most cost effective. What is the most cost-effective way or frequency to come back and maintain those conditions? Simply by replacing the sand that's lost. And ideally, if it's for an 8-year renourishment interval, you have 100,000 yard per year sand loss rate. You put 800,000 yards out there, and 8 years later, you're back exactly to your minimum beach condition everywhere. That rarely, if ever, happens. But that is the goal, and that's what we're talking about. So we're looking at two different things right now. One is, what is the definition of a minimum beach condition, and how far are you from that everywhere along the island? And we'll talk about the definition in a minute. And then we're going to talk about what does it take to maintain that. And that's where the alternatives come in. The alternatives are going to come in. We're going to maintain it simply through repetitive sand renourishment, which is not too dissimilar to what you've done historically, but in a more proactive way. And then if there are areas that we determine cannot be maintained with sand placement alone, that's where we will start adding other types of activities like a structure or structures or this proactive shoal management on the north end of the island. So it might be that there have to be localized intervention because the along-shore sand loss rate varies significantly on the island properties. So where we are in the planning process right now is we need to determine what is the minimum healthy beach condition and get consensus among this group on how we want to represent that in this study. And so there's a couple of things that we need to consider in that process. So we've gone back through lots of reports that CSC has prepared over the years, and the way the minimum beach condition has been described so far on ILCOMS is through a volume-based argument. This is a volume-based approach. This is something that Dr. Tim Khanna, it was his approach. I think that either through his academic studies or his own approach, came up with this as a way to represent, hey, what should the beach be in its healthy condition at a minimum. It's gone through a couple of iterations in the Isle of Palms through the years. In 2007, you had one definition that was down above -5 feet at 100 cubic yards per foot. And then 2018, it was lowered to -10 to 350 cubic yards per foot. We haven't spent a lot of time with this so far to see if clearly there's not been success in this everywhere because of this irregular sand loss rate. But what this does is it's difficult to visualize. If you're in the field, you can't say, hey, I know we've talked a lot about the 200 feet width from some baseline. But it's hard to see this. You got to wait for a monitoring report every year to see if you're achieving your goals. And so there can be a lot of debate and a lot of confusion on what that really means on a day-to-day basis. The way we have done it in some of the other areas, and we can see this in other communities also, we have the volume-based approach, what we just talked about, but is a horizontal offset from a defined baseline. And I think when we get in, where we're having trouble at this point is what is the baseline? Because whether you're using the volume-based approach or the horizontal offset, that be a X number of feet from some point out to a mean high water line or some other point of reference on the beach, we need to know where the baseline is. So we've spent a lot of time over the last month looking back to what that baseline could be, and really have had a lot of internal discussion, and it's what we would like to kind of lay out for you guys today and kind of put this in context of where things are spatially along the island. We break this into the north end of the island and the south end of the island, and a lot of my conversation right now is going to be on the south end of the island as we talk through this, but it'll be very easily applied to the north end of the island as well. So there are a couple of things that we can look at, and one are the SCDES baseline and setback line. We used to call them the OCLM lines or other on the island. These are the state-regulated baseline and setback line. And traditionally what the baseline has been is the location of the primary dune on the oceanfront portion of the island, and then the landwardmost position of that dune over the past 40 years in the dynamic inlet zones. And then the setback is the distance from the baseline landward, either 40 feet or 40 times the erosion rate on the island. That's the setback line, and these are jurisdictional lines that the state uses to regulate those respective activities. So we understand it was last set in 2017 on the island, revised in 2019. We haven't gotten into the details of what was revised there, but we do understand that there is an update coming. And these are lines that do move. Every 10 years, the state wants to revisit them, and they do move. What you may have seen historically on Isle of Palms is these have moved landward because you've had some long-term shoreline retreat. What we've seen in other parts of the state, specifically Hilton Head Island, as these beach nourishment projects get well developed and start advancing the dune system, we see these lines advance. And that does allow upland and property interests to advance their development rights also. And this is where the town of Hilton Head Island established their beach line that says, hey, this is our current line of development. We're never going to let development go seaward of this line. So the other line that we, more similar to Hilton Head, is this seaward extent of existing infrastructure. And we've spent time with aerial photography looking at what does this look like. And I think everyone here knows it does vary a lot along Isle of Palms in terms of it's very irregular. So what we would look at is striking a more uniform line of what that development looks like. And I say other here because I'm going to come back and as part of this conversation and hear what everyone thinks. So what we have, and I will try to zoom in a little bit here, is, and I will tell you what we've done. So the red line is the state's baseline. This is on the south end of the island. The blue line is the setback line for this area. So at the time this was set, there really wasn't a very high erosion rate here. And so what we see, like at Hilton Head and some areas that are very erosional, the blue line might be 200 feet landward of the red line, which can be problematic. And we might see that happen along this area of the island in the next update. What the black line is Chris and Sydney's best estimate of where the seaward edge of development is, and smoothing between lots. We didn't where the development line might have projected landward in localized areas. We basically just jumped between the adjacent parcels, and you can see this at one of the beach access points here. But what this is intended to represent is like, where does development exist today? And is this a line that the city wants to use as a baseline? That's a question, and we'll get back to that. So the next thing is, when we talk about, is where are some of these reference lines that we talk about as we go through the process. So what we've done here is we've taken the black line, which is the seaward edge of development, and we've done a 200-foot offset to, which is the green line. And then we've taken the baseline, the red line, and also done a 200-foot offset from this. And you can see how far seaward these project out onto the existing beach condition. And so what we were interested in looking at was in these various definitions here, has the beach historically ever been this far seaward of this development line? And in some areas the answer is yes. In some of the areas, it's no. And so we find that it's not real uniform on how the beach is shaped. However, the development line is very uniform. So I think we find also with the volume-based method, if you can't simply just do a projection of, it's based on an average, we just can't simply do an average projection everywhere because the conditions vary so much as you go along shore. So that's a lot, and we can see real quick, this is kind of a similar photograph. We can see that in areas out here over here at the far south end, the shoreline has has been seaward of that 200-foot offset from both the baseline and the development line. But in other areas, it's barely been that far offshore. Really, the 200-foot offset is probably not from the edge of development. It's probably not a terrible position of it, but we don't really know what that means. One thing that we haven't done and are not anticipating doing is what level of protection does that really afford you? So we're not really tasked right now to do any S-beach modeling or X-beach modeling or things like that, looking at storm frequency, but it is something that can be done if we need to dig further into helping you justify what this baseline is that you want to describe. We do know, however, if we pick the South Carolina baseline and setback line, this thing is going to move. It is very possible within the year that these two lines will be at a different location. What is consistent here is the edge of development. And that could be a line that we want to describe and then determine how far do we want this offset to be. And it can vary along shore, right? We don't have to have an adopted uniform condition everywhere. But we would seek to identify some offset or some volume, going back to the volume-based argument, using the line of development as the minimum condition. And we can really represent it as both. If we do a 200-foot offset, we can also go along shore and say, okay, here's how the two compare. Here's the 200-foot offset, or 100-foot offset, or 300-foot offset, whatever we decide. And then we can also show how much volume along shore does it take to maintain that. And so you really have, you can describe it both ways. So that's where we are And we really have questions now and wanted to open it up for discussion of what does this committee want to see, and how do we want to represent this? This is a cross-sectional view, the same thing of these same graphics, where we have the black vertical line here representing the edge of development, that being a pool, then the beach profile, and then the baseline current position of it is the red line. The setback line is the blue line, and then the green line is the 200-foot offset from the black line, and then the red line is that. So it kind of shows it in cross section what these different things represent. So I'm going to stop there for a minute and just kind of see where this goes. And if you guys, we understand that you guys have spent time on this topic, and we've seen some notes from that, but we didn't know if our representation of this and our presentation of this information might affect the way you guys have had your conversation, or if you can expand on your thoughts based on how we're looking at this.
Can I have a question?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay, John Schilling here. So there are parts of the island where the houses are set back very far inland from the beach. Like
That's right.
300-400 feet. So, but there's no beach, no sand beach at high tide in front of these houses. So how would you handle that in Hilton Head? Would you not renourish it because there was a large beach protecting the property?
He's talking about a vegetated beach, right, where you have.
Yeah, it's really the upland there. We do at Hilton Head, we do two things. One, we look at the distance, but we also look at what is the sand loss rate at that location. Even if we have 300 feet of beach at that point, we want to know how much beach will we have 3 years from now when we actually go to try to build this beach project. So we look at beach erosion, but in some areas like South Forest Beach is an example, which is kind of around, for anyone familiar with Hilton Head, around the Cleveland Circle, there's some infrastructure that's set way back. But what we're trying to do is maintain uniform conditions along the entire island. And if it takes sand placement along those areas to maintain uniform conditions, we do it. But we might not place much sand there. And in some other areas, we've established these massive dune fields over through our repetitive renourishment through time, and we place sand to protect the dunes. The town has the opportunity to do some of those activities, but where we are on these areas of Isle Pond right now, we're really going to try to start establishing some minimum conditions. And where this infrastructure set so far back, we may just say, hey, we don't need to do anything other than just basic maintenance, see where those areas, as opposed to building the beach further out. That would be, and the conversation we're having right now, really focused on reach 1 and 2 and 5 and 6. I think the areas where you're talking about will probably reach us 3 and 4.
Exactly, yeah.
Chris, more directly to the pictures that you're showing in your analysis so far, it appears to me that what you're not looking at is the homeowner's property line, and maybe you can comment on that. I would think that some people could take the position and say it's the city's responsibility to protect its inhabitants and their properties. And so where the property line is plays a role, doesn't it?
Well, the property line is, South Carolina has jurisdiction from the setback line. So there's nothing
That's right.
a property owner can do that's up to, you have to get a permit from the state. And the only thing they allow is like a beach walkover. So that sort of is the property line. They may own out to that little black line that's even far out, but it's not their property that they can do anything with. I think from the.
Yeah, that's right. Is this Wendy speaking?
Yeah, hi, Wendy here.
Hey, how are you?
Our concern when we were talking about this is that we have, dunes that are around the baseline. And what we're seeing is that we can't really make it through, a 6-foot tide with a little bit of wind. We have dune destruction. And we want to have a place where people can come, tourists or residents to come and hang out on the beach. So we need a recreational beach because this is a beach island and our entire economy is driven by that. So to let the erosion go up to a structure, we're seeing pools fall in the ocean, we're sandbagging. So we're trying to get away from that. We're trying to protect the beach from the dune forward is where we were thinking. So it would be interesting to see what your thoughts are and what's the right measurement if you were to say, okay, we want to protect the dune and we want to be able to make it through the normal tides within a year, but we also want to position ourselves so that there is a big storm, a named storm that comes at us, that we don't have massive destruction either.
Okay, that's a pretty okay. Sydney, are you taking notes? I think we might. That's what we want to get from the committee today are questions like that, and it would be really helpful if those could be written down. And we can help you if you can kind of bulletize your thoughts on what. Hey, here's our desires. Here are our goals. And do those goals and desires vary from spot to spot along the island? And then we can go back and look at what that means, and we can do some analysis to maybe look at what type of protection that might afford, what the conditions, and those conditions between the nourishment events that you're talking about, dry sand where you can place towels, will vary. But during the course of that nourishment interval, I know at Hilton Head, the beach is really wide. Right now, we're finishing a project. They put there's sand everywhere. But as time goes on, two things are going to happen. The dunes are going to expand into this, this unvegetated area, so they're going to march seaward. But the beach is eroded. And then like here, we do get back to these narrow conditions, especially at high tide, where, the water does come right up to the base of the dune. And that's just the way these beaches behave in South Carolina. It's really hard to maintain at high tide, particularly when you have high king tides, expansive, wide, dry beach from the edge of the vegetated dune out to some point on the beach.
I don't think that we're advocating that we have a huge beach at like an 8-foot tide. What we're trying to do is not have dune destruction at an 8-foot tide and pool destruction and debris falling in the ocean. So if you survive at a 5.5 tide, you set it at that, then that's great. But you have to allow some room to make it through a normal year. We have 12 periods of the year where we have over 6 feet tides, and you can have wind on those days. That's just a normal part of the life at Isle of Palms. And if we're having dune destruction 12 times a year, you're eventually going to continue eroding, and then you're going to have debris falling in the ocean, and then you will have problems with tourism because they don't have anywhere to sit because people are sandbagging, and we want to get out of that.
Yeah, ideally, though, when we set a minimum beach condition, we're going to maintain conditions similar to that. So ideally, conditions will always be wider than that minimum condition, except right before the next nourishment.
So
that's the ideal approach.
Dan,
let me ask you this.
closer to the microphone, please.
Yeah, he won't.
I'm Dan Slotchever. Let me ask you a question because it goes to the impact of the ideal beach. And since you're looking at the future and how to protect us from having this happen so quickly, on the one hand, cosmetically, having uniformity seems to work and it gives us a target to kind of look at that can be measured. But my question to you is, recognizing that there are certain hot pockets of historical erosion, and there's new developing hot pockets that are coming of historical erosion. Are we, if we use an automatic, call it 200 across the board, are we correcting these hot pockets, or are we just setting it up in the future where they're still going to be there? Another way to say it is, are we better off to beef up the areas that we have hot pockets? Would that give us more protection and not put so much in some of the other areas, or are we better off to have a uniform beach?
Well, I think having a uniform beach everywhere is politically popular when everybody feels like they're being treated equally. What might vary in the future is how much sand do you place in these respective areas to get you through these renourishment intervals? And where McCall, based on this, the erosion rate, and I think this is what you're referring to, there may be that we have to put a structure there to slow it down, to get it back to a rate that's manageable with sand. You follow me?
I do. So say, for example, if we have a hot pocket at part of Wild Dunes, we can still do the same uniform beach, but then put a structure in order to maintain that area so that that doesn't become a continual problem.
That's right. That's right. Or hey, you're just going to have a bigger, more frequent nourishment program there, because the erosion rate's higher. You just got to be more aggressive in those locations. Where we have a minimum beach condition in the island that's not so erosional, it may always be. We may never have to do anything. And at the south end of the island, the same thing. But I think that's establishing some type of standard along the entire island. Everybody feels like they're being treated equally. And that
in the future, correct? That's the other thing.
That's right. Then we have to figure out how to manage that. How do we maintain that? That's the future action. That's part two. And when I described early on in the conversation today about design beach, how the Corps does it, and advanced nourishment. Design beach is step one, and advanced nourishment step two.
So what is the advantages of using a structure line instead of the baseline that we all know and kind of define as our legal property line? And it's kind of where the dunes are, it's where the tourists can go, seaward of that line. Why would you be proposing to go back to structure?
Well,
We're desperately trying to get away from it. Is there a pro to doing that, is my question.
we could do the structural line plus 50 feet and then go from there. We could do something else, but I think adopting these seaward, can you see my cursor? These property lines out here as a baseline, I don't. I mean, I guess we could. It could work in some areas of the island, but it definitely won't work down here. But I guess if the city wants to do something like this, hey, here's the baseline. Go here. We're going to go here, here. Kind of something like this, and go all the way down. And then let's make this line red.
So what line are you drawing? Because that doesn't look like it's 150 or 200 feet from the baseline. So I lost what you're doing.
No, I'm going along the seaward property lines.
No, I'm sorry. We're defining it as the South Carolina DES baseline.
Oh, yeah. Okay, this line, the red line.
Yep, that's right.
So Chris,
Well, that's going to change. Probably going to move.
could I just, I guess, kind of to level set, have a conversation about the fact the city had basically CSE was working on a minimum healthy beach profile that I think Tim Khanna probably developed 25 years ago.
That's right.
And I think that you all would be aware that the prior ad hoc committee came up with a new minimum beach profile that was based on a volumetric measurement. This group very recently, and it's actually, if I emailed, when I sent the packet, when I sent the agenda, it is in the minutes, connected to the minutes to the last meeting that you'd be able to see, but this group developed a new minimum healthy beach profile, and it's really a combination of both lines. It's either, and I think it's 250 feet from either the structure.
200 feet.
200 feet, from either the structure or the baseline, whichever is farther seaward. So when you get into Wild Dunes, obviously, the jurisdictional line is up on the other side of the houses. So in Wild Dunes, it would generally be the structural line, and on the south end, it would generally be the OCRM, the BCM line. So they have developed that. they've made that recommendation to city council going forward to use kind of this hybrid approach. That was a divergence from what has historically been done, and I would say that the other part that this group has looked into and developed recommendations is a different erosion rate. So they've done some calculations to make recommendations to council on an additional amount of renourishment sand on the current project we're about to do, and that was based on erosion rates that were different than what the city had.
Yeah, we
had been
basically
using.
recommended to take the last 5 years as opposed to some other recommendations
As
that went,
opposed to
Okay.
16 years.
yeah, 12 or
Well,
16.
they were
back.
using recent on the north and then 16 years on the south, I believe.
Okay.
So the group has done some work on, done a lot of work on minimum healthy beach profiles. And we haven't shared that with you, other than just kind of incidentally, we sent you the packet, and the packet happened to have minutes of that discussion attached to it. And I don't know if it would be worthwhile for us to just share with you what they've done, and you will react to that, or if you'd rather kind of,
That would be very helpful.
yeah.
I guess my question back to the group is, what is it based on? I mean, is this just, was there, how did you reach this conclusion that that's what you wanted to do?
So we were trying to protect tourism and homes simultaneously. The way the line is now on the north end, it works great because it's from a structure, but the structure and the baseline are kind of one and the same. In some places, the homes are seaward of the baseline. So that definition of using a structure line has been working okay for us. But now that we've got erosion on the south end, the definition of 360, 380 cubic yards per foot, it's showing us as healthy, even though we have dune destruction when we've got a high tide and some wind. So we're not even making it through a named storm. So I feel like there's a disconnect between the definition that we have using a structure line. The other issue is that, we're eroding into property that tourists can't go to. People can't, hang out in somebody's backyard pool, for example. So when they come to the beach, they don't have a place to put their chair down. That's frustrating. We've got debris going into the ocean, et cetera. So I understand your point that we're going to set it far enough and then maintain it, so we're going to be okay. But we do have these periods where all of a sudden we have surprises. So, if we can lose 100 feet of beach in a relatively short amount of time, 1 or 2 years, do we need to establish, that beach such that we can make it through those type of surprises?
That hopefully would be established. That's what we're trying to manage. That would be our goal, to be proactive. I talked about that in the second opinion letter. We need everyone to be comfortable with the minimum is, and then we're going to engineer the solutions to protect that. Right? That's where the alternative. This is really not an alternative. This is just what's the minimum condition you want. Where the alternatives are going to come in is like, how do we protect this?
Chris,
Excuse me, we came up with this, our definition of a minimum healthy beach without hearing your presentation that you made today. And I think you have brought up some areas that we missed when we came up with our recommendations. And that is the goal of having a uniform beach that everyone up and down the coast can enjoy. Like you said, it's politically popular. And we've never looked at reaches 3 and 4. So I think before we come up with some hard definition of where some line should be, we need to have your study go all the way along the coast and see what happens when structures are way back from the water, and not try to do something with incomplete information. And I like your idea, a uniform beach across the island.
Reaches 3 and 4 are accretional.
When you know what?
So
you
it's gonna
you
be
don't know
tricky.
that there are gaps in there where it's the water's coming in over the trash cans. Okay.
I know that's
So I don't.
based
You
on
know what? I
data.
don't want your opinion on it. I want.
It's not an
I
opinion,
want.
it's what,
Yeah.
it's
No.
what
It's
the
what.
monitoring report shows.
No, not for the whole
Let us see.
reach.
Okay, sorry.
The reaches aren't uniform. There's
agree.
sections of the reach that vary.
I agree.
Okay, so this is why I think we need someone who knows what they're doing. Do a thorough, take a thorough picture of every foot of our shoreline, okay? And I don't want to hear, I'm tired of hearing that you're just saying this. And a uniform beach is something that we would like to have at that spot, and there's no reason it can't happen.
So Chris, this might help you for the debate. We've got areas that have a lot of grasses growing on them. And so when,
Yep.
people rent a house and they want to go to the beach, they can't get their chair down because we've had a shoal attachment and then it starts eroding in that area. But it's been not eroding that area in the past, so it grew a bunch of stuff and now they can't put their chair down. So that's, how do we get a place for people to come?
Are
and
there
enjoy?
areas where you guys can point these out to us for that?
53rd, is 53rd, John, the
Yeah, about
best example?
53rd. It's where the reach, one thing I like about your report is you name the reaches, so then we know what we're talking about instead of numbers. But that's just a thank you for doing that. It's at the edge of, bottom of Wild Dunes and the top edge of the reach that's below it. It's, that's a very long
Yeah,
reach.
we didn't show reaches 3 and 4 today. We're trying to throw this concept out. But
Yeah.
I guess what I'm hearing is that you guys need some more information, and we can prepare that for you. I think the feedback we're getting today is super helpful, and I think we know what it is, how we can represent this. I would like to spend more time with the explanation of what you've already decided as a group, so we can also add that to some graphics. It's like, hey, why Sydney and I sat down and was like, hey, what does this look like if we sat down and started drawing it? And that's why, for some of these concepts, like 200 feet here, 350 cubic acre foot there, like what does that really mean? And so that's why we've spent time doing this, and we found it to be helpful. So we can step back after today with the input that you have here, provide you some graphics from the whole island, and so we can maybe I would like to, instead of waiting another 4 months or 3 months to meet again, I would like to meet sooner than later. Because for us to advance our study, we need some consensus on what the baseline is that we're going to use for the study, right? It can always change in the future, but we need to know what the baseline is because we need to know how much sand does it take to create that. And that's a volume of sand that we need to allocate from those sources we talked about. And then we can move into step 2 of the study of how do we protect what we want to maintain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Chris, just in summary, you got it probably from this conversation. We have at least 3 different situations in Isle of Palms, and they're all represented here on this committee. One in the very north in Wild Dunes is where you have houses already in the water, and so we want to protect, obviously, those homes, and that's where the definition we gave ourselves as 200 foot of dry beach in front of these homes from the structure is solid. Then we have the second area all the way in the south that Wendy spoke about quite a bit, where we still do have dunes, and we have a relatively destroyed beach that doesn't withstand high tides. The homes are safer because they're a little bit further back, and there's a little bit of sand between the structure and the dry beach. But here, our intention would be to establish and save that beach, and that's why we chose the definition of 200 feet from the SCDES baseline. And then we have in the middle of the island an area that John just spoke about, where we have the bizarre situation that we have quite a lot of beach in front of the houses, but the beach is all overgrown, which also presents a challenge that people just can't go to the beach anymore and use the beach appropriately because it's overgrown. So ideally, we want to address all three of these in an appropriate way.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, let us dig a little deeper into this. This has been great feedback because I'm actually running out of time right now. Zach and Cindy and Evan, are you tracking how the conversation is going and kind of putting your thoughts together also and what our next moves might be?
Yes.
Can you point us to any studies that show the economic benefits of doing nourishment? I've seen these figures like from Miami Beach, $1 of nourishment brings in $1 million of tourism revenue. Is there anything specific that we could use to help present to town council?
Yeah, so there's a guy named Dr. Jim Houston, who was the head of the Corps of Engineers Waterway Experimentation for years. And he has retired. He's an older gentleman now. And he spends a lot of time on that topic. Okay. And he publishes papers fairly frequently on that topic from various places around the world, around the country. And so we could probably dig up some of that. He does a really nice job kind of putting it in, in an everyday person's, explanation.
That would be
so
very
let's try to dig those up. We'll dig those up and send you some. And they may just be presentations and not papers, but we can give you some links to that.
All right, appreciate it.
Okay, yeah, we are interested in having a more frequent dialogue with you and your team as well. So why don't you come back to our next meeting in a month from now? We are meeting monthly here as a committee.
A month is a good time. I got a conference in a couple of weeks, so I'm gonna be busy doing that. But we can definitely have some dialogue internally, figure out what our next approach is. I think we got some good feedback today, and I think we can give something, push something back that can be useful, and hopefully make a decision during that next meeting. And it may not be something that the city ultimately wants to adopt formally right now, but we'll present it as, hey, this is what we're using for this study, and this is why.
Chris, June 4th at 9 a.m. If that works for you. That's their next meeting.
It might be helpful
Sounds
to,
good.
could we get an update on the timeline of the project and key inputs that you need from this team as part of that timeline?
Sure, we'll talk about that as well.
All right, thanks.
This has been a little bit of a detour from us. We didn't realize we were going to dig so far deep into this baseline issue until we got into it. Then we're like, hey, this is a pretty important thing. We need to get this worked out. So that's we really spent a little more time on this than we anticipated, but I think it's very important for the success of the study, I believe.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
all.
Chris. Thank you, Chris's team. And we see you in a month.
Sounds great, guys.
Thank
See you
you.
in a month. Thank you. Okay, bye.
Thank you all.
All right, that brings us to our next topic of old existing business, and that is a recap a little bit of the renourishment efforts. And City Council, in the meantime, met, was it the 29th? I think the 28th or 29th, and debated the topic. One of the key aspects was to get the paperwork in from the homeowners, to get the easements in place, to continue with the project on the south end. City Council decided to move forward with contracting with Marinex on the north end. The Wild Dunes funds, I think, have been sent over now and are in your possession.
I think, hadn't been as of last night, but that may have changed overnight. I don't know. Hadn't heard. Any minute, if it hasn't already. Another hour.
And so maybe you can start by updating us, Douglas, of what has all happened since the last council meeting.
Yeah, well, and I guess I'll just go to that to kind of recap for if anybody wasn't there or didn't hear. We had significant gaps in the easements that we had acquired on the south end. There wasn't a practical way to kind of work around those properties. So City Council, as Dietmar said, has awarded the North End project and gave an additional 2 weeks to work on the South End property owners. So they are planning to meet Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, prior to their Ways and Means meeting to reconsider awarding a contract on the South End. I think the number of easements in hand at the meeting, or that we were missing, was between 10 and 15. That number is now down to 3. Unfortunately, the 3 are still kind of in the middle of the project. They're not at the ends. There are certain properties that could be kind of easily worked around at the ends. We could just stop the project. So we do have 3 remaining. We are on the phone and in contact with those 3 and just explaining to them the importance of their participation. And, you know, I know that they're looking at it with a close eye on their own personal, you know, interests of their properties, which we know and respect. But we're trying to kind of be sure they're aware of the importance to the entire community of that work happening. So we're having those conversations. Hopefully we'll get the remaining 3 or commitment from those remaining 3 between today and Tuesday. But in any situation, council will be, it's a much better situation today than it was when they met. So progress is still being made. It's just, you know, the last kind of property owners to wrangle it's just challenging.
So the 3 that are missing are not in the 900s? They are more in the
No,
middle?
I think it's 400 block, 700 block, and 800 block, I believe. I know they're kind of central.
Is the plan still to start the renourishment next month on the north end?
June 20th.
Yes.
So Stephen has stated that CSC has stated that he can work around projects. They've done it before. They've done it in Florida, where it's locally funded. They, skip homes, and town council is willing to take a minor risk for skipping a few homes for the betterment of the island. So things to the council to consider. If we don't get those 3, we're still pushing hard to get the final 3.
Right. Yeah, we'll, once we know definitively where the gaps are and if they're going to remain gaps, we don't know that yet. But we will have to know kind of by Tuesday what their condition is, and then the question, to Wendy's point, for Stephen will be how can we practically do a project around three properties, and it would matter geographically where they were. Again, if they were at the very ends, it would be easy enough.
Yeah, if
right
I
now-
remember the discussion in the council that evening, I was a little bit frustrated because we spoke early and then we couldn't participate in the debate anymore. But it seemed like some council members were willing to take more of a risk on that topic. And certainly the amount of properties that we talked about that evening sounded more than 3.
Yes.
People
that's
were
right.
saying 90% or so. If you have 90% or 95% of the easements in, we should move forward. So 3 seems to me very manageable. And I'd like to make the recommendation to City Council to move forward with the South End based on the fact that we have now all the easements but 3
Or in the mail.
in the mail.
Right.
So I think if we only have 3 missing, this committee should make the recommendation to City Council to move forward with the South End project.
I'll just give you again my opinion. Without knowing the impact of that, again, if we don't have 3 and we have to do some kind of workaround, I assume there could be cost associated with that. And without having that knowledge, I can't say that I'd make any kind of recommendation. Because if they came back and said, it's going to be another $2 million to work around these 3 homes. I don't think that's what it is, but without knowing that, I can't make a recommendation, or don't suggest making a recommendation.
Dave, I think I hear you. I understand what you're saying, but I think that risk is significantly smaller than
I
the risk
agree.
not doing the South
I
End
agree,
project.
but committing to something without knowing the risk, I just don't think is appropriate. And again, maybe saying that and going, I'm just trying, it just popped through my head a way to word it, to say you recommend going forward if it's feasibly possible, or setting some kind of rent,
I can go with a wording change like that.
Yeah, that's what I was, again, just coming saying.
I just
again,
would
that's how
like
it
to
comes across.
increase the pressure on city council to act now in a positive way and include the South End in the project.
Yeah, and that's what I was coming from. It just sounds like if you're not considering it, that you're just, we don't care, cost no object, go forward with it, as opposed to, we think that this would be should be feasible and we should move forward.
I'm assuming if they don't agree and you can't go forward, there will have to be some type of workaround. So I think that your recommendation is good.
Yeah, that's all I was
There's
getting
no way
at.
not to do anything, it's just how do we do it if we can't get an agreement? Okay.
I know one of the properties is worried about destruction of his dunes because he's got pretty decent dunes. Who's worried about the turtles, so spent a lot of time talking about the turtle protocol of how the turtle team handles all of that. So he has valid concerns. I think that they can all be addressed through the way that they're going to be doing the dunes. They're not planning to destroy dunes. They're planning on protecting turtle eggs. So I think that some of those hurdles can be met. So I don't think the risks are high if those are the type of concerns
Oh,
that that
again, I don't
gentleman
think they
has.
are either, but until you have the person that's actually writing charging you, tell you that it's not going to be high, you don't know that.
Right.
That was my point.
Well, I have another
was-
another conversation with a homeowner on Friday. Sometimes, they like to talk differently to homeowners
Yeah.
in the city because, the big bad city trying to take stuff from you. You never
Yeah,
know how
would-
people feel,
hidden
right?
agenda.
Right, so I'll have that conversation on Friday. And then there's one, I don't have the contact information. I don't know if it would be helpful. I'll talk to you afterwards on that one. But we'll see where we can go. We're trying to get the city risk to zero. I think that that's a question that town council should be making. I think that there's also great risks of do nothing also, so.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So can I move forward with my motion? And I'm
Second.
Well, I need a clear wording.
clear wording is that the Beach Preservation Committee is recommending to City Council to move forward with the project on the south end, based on the fact that we have all of the easements in but 3. And notwithstanding that there may be very significant costs facing the city by working around those 3 properties.
I second, or I make the motion.
That was the motion.
That was, I seconded that.
There you go.
All right. Anybody for it?
Aye.
Aye.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, the cost shouldn't be too much, right? You just pull the pipe.
But yeah, without knowing.
I understand your point,
That was
yeah.
my point, was
Yeah.
without
No, I get it.
knowing.
So in the interest of time, I'd like us to move forward. We have one new item to discuss, and that new item probably will be with us for a couple of meetings. I don't expect us to solve that today in the next 20 or 30 minutes, but at least get a first idea of what were the financial considerations that were discussed at the ad hoc beach committee to potentially raise more sources of revenue to fund future beach renourishment projects. And for that, I think, Douglas, you had sent out a spreadsheet that was, I guess, established by the ad hoc beach committee,
Correct.
probably with city's help.
Correct.
And you would be willing and kind to lead us through that right
Sure.
now?
Yeah, absolutely. And the way that the ad hoc committee looked at this was breaking it into kind of those that city council can control. They have complete control over those that are, well, within the limits of operating within the state code, obviously. The first block of revenue streams are within the city's control. That included parking fees of various types, property tax increases. Again, there are limits to what the city can do with those property tax increases, but there's a number in there for that. building permit fees, business license fees, short-term rental fees. One that was considered and has been considered but never been implemented are on-beach franchise user fees. And also, there is the idea of a beach service or user fee that would be tacked on. It's similar to a property tax, but it is a set amount, not driven by the value of the property. So that top grouping is all controlled by council within certain guide rails. I would just say, for the benefit of the group, the current draft, it just so happens that city council is working through their budgeting process for next year. Their current draft of the budget has the maximum property increase allowed with the rollback assumptions of you can kind of recapture millage that you failed to capture for the 3 prior years. So they've included that in this draft.
That's still around 791,000.
It's around there. I actually haven't updated. It is slightly different than that, but it's slightly under $1 million.
And the number on the left is the actual baseline today of property tax.
That's correct.
The 4.8 million.
That's correct. And again, these are now approaching 2 years old, so those numbers are slightly different, but they're within 10%.
Is there a reason why if the city decided to implement these, why they can't be done now as opposed to next year?
There is, I mean, the property tax.
Some of them, but the other ones have been sitting, and I just look at the numbers that we could have generated had we done this, and I don't know why we want to wait until next year to get it approved. We can start doing it quicker.
Well, right now, he's trying to explain to us what city council has decided that they want to do.
So
So this was the
I
first
thought
line
city
item.
council had decided.
I may answer your question. So when we talk about budgeting and in a fiscal year, that starts July.
Okay.
So this would be, we're looking at.
But implementing it
So-
in July, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not, I was realizing you were thinking like, oh, so, yeah, that's kind of what the timeframe is.
Okay.
So what else did city council already put into the
Yep.
budget?
So the other ones, I think, in that grouping that is city controlled, city council has in their draft budget, has a 15% increase across all of those other line items. So parking fees, business license fees, building permit fees, short-term rental license fees. So those all are anticipated or included currently at a 15% increase. Still no, and I don't know that there's not an appetite for it, but it hasn't been brought up, the idea of on-beach franchise fees or a beach user fee to be paid by property owners. So those are still.
That would be really nothing different than just an added tax, right? Whether it's
There-
property tax or
That's
whether.
correct. It shows up in your tax bill. It's a different calculation for how you get it. It's a flat fee as opposed to
So
a,
everybody pays the same,
The
whether
same-
you're a resident or non-resident.
No, this is for residents only.
this would be property owners only. I mean, so,
Each property owner will get like $100.
that's correct. Flat
So
fee
it's like
instead
your-
of,
It's like your stormwater user fee that's on your
It's
bill.
just, so it's
That's a-
flat amongst everybody.
That's correct.
Regardless of their.
the value.
You know, how the non-residents. and
That's
the
correct.
residents, right.
But that is currently not considered by city council.
That's correct. I say not considered, they did discuss it and
Did not do it.
they, I think, opted for the
There
property
didn't
tax
seem to be a
increase.
strong support for doing it. Is that the right?
We can only make a recommendation,
Yeah.
okay? So we get it.
And what was the logic behind the 15% flat increase of all the other line items?
Well.
Why not 20, why
more?
not 10?
Yeah, I think, and I would say that each of those has been increased since '24. So there's been a steady kind of ramping up of those fees. Why not 20 and why not 10? There wasn't a real detailed discussion about that. I think 15 was kind of a round number. Also generated just under $1 million of revenue. So, they haven't indicated an actual goal of we need X dollars additionally per year. But I think,
And has there been a discussion in city council about the fact that if I look at these line items, like a business license fee would obviously hit the people that are doing business in the Isle of Palms, whereas a parking meter fee increase hits non-residents of Isle of Palms, the ones that we want to try to contribute in a stronger way to
Yeah.
the preservation of our beaches. But that's why I'm wondering, why is it 15% for everybody? Why did city council not say, let's do business license fee only 10% and let's increase the parking lot fees by 100%?
yeah, I don't think there was really, I mean,
That's
from my
probably-
perspective, they
I think
didn't
that's
get
gonna
into
come up in our Ways and Means this week, that.
how to kind of divvy that. I think it's maybe now
Yeah,
just been
so
generic
When he
placeholders.
says these were put in the budget as placeholders to see, okay, what will that do to our, revenue?
Yeah,
So I think in our next Ways and Means, it's gonna be kind of a discussion of, do we wanna throw any of these out? Do we wanna change any of them? So I don't know how that affects, is like from this committee coming back saying, but I don't think any of the discussion at council levels like, quote, earmark beach related.
right. And I'm just asking questions, Dave,
Yeah.
because this is pretty premature for us to make recommendations here, particularly in the middle of the budgeting process. I think we need to investigate this a little bit further and dwell on it. I was just asking, why would we treat everybody the same?
Yeah, no,
I think there's a big, obviously, a big concern about taxes and the height of taxes in the city of Isle of Palms, and there's a large voice on the city of Isle of Palms to make those individuals that are not from here and using the beaches pay more. Right, so that would speak against treating everybody the same way.
So, and I may have, I think I did kind of skip over one of the recommendations here that is not in motion in any way, and kind of hits to your point, Dietmar, is the idea of charging to park outside of the areas, so outside of the areas where you currently have to pay. Right now, in all of the residential districts on the island, it's free to park. That was one of the recommendations from the Beach Ad Hoc Committee to consider implementing paid parking within the other rights-of-way where visitors can park and
So
go to the beach.
specifically, you're talking about Palm Boulevard?
At Palm Boulevard, the avenues, the visitors can park along 8th, 7th, 6th, 9th. So anywhere where beach visitor parking is allowed, there was a suggestion of looking into requiring payment to park. I would just say that we already know from discussions with the DOT that there would be some limitations as to how that would be done. They've already indicated a certain percentage would always have to be free. The roads are controlled entirely by the DOT. They've expressed to us that they probably would not give to the city most of the roads where we park. Could be that some of the avenues we could take back from them or take from them. So that would be challenging, but not to say it's not possible. But that was a consideration that's in here and hasn't been implemented.
And I think the idea would be to not to use parking meters, but to use these companies, and where like we see downtown everywhere now, you just punch in your code and you punch in your license plate. So it's,
Right.
so
Yeah,
it's easy
app-based.
to manage, and you're not changing the look of the property.
Yeah, that would be interesting. They'd love us.
You want any more on city controlled?
Nope. Unless, were there any new ones coming up?
The only other one, and this is really, again, kind of just generally raising revenues that city council is looking at, is the city currently returns local option sales tax. There is a optional sales tax that is collected. Currently, the city gives that back to the property owners as a credit on their tax bill at 100%. The requirement would allow the city to give back as little as 77%. If the city were to opt to not credit that at 100%, I believe the amount of revenue associated with that is in the realm of $300,000 of additional revenue. So that's not on this list. That is being discussed by City Council. The idea of potentially not giving back, not crediting the full local option sales tax. Again, it would show up on a tax bill. If you're not getting a certain credit that you had historically gotten, it kind of roughly equates to a property tax increase. I think it would be seen that way, even though it's slightly different. But that's a consideration that council is weighing on.
Okay. And I understood you correctly that the property tax increase that is being considered is the maximum amount allowed by law,
That's correct.
whereas all the other increases that are right now earmarked here with 15%, there's no limits to those.
The one exception to that would be building permit fees. There is a requirement that building permit fees be roughly, and I don't know the exact language of the statute, but that it not be a cash cow for the city, that it is supposed to offset the expense of administering and regulating construction. So the work of doing the inspections, running that department that handles the inspections cannot be just kind of a full cash cow. So there are limits to how much we can go up on those on the building permit fees, business license fees.
I thought there was something similar to that, some kind of
There's really,
limit, but we historically haven't.
yeah, there's not really on business license fees. There is there's kind of guidance on bad governance of kind of running up fees to a point that it's impossible to do work in a community, or you get to a point where people don't want to do work in a community. You call them to put a roof on your house, and you find that nobody is responding to your inquiries to put on a roof, and dig into that, and you find that they just don't want to pay the cost of entry into the market. So there's concern there. I don't know that it's a regulatory concern.
Okay. Why don't you talk us then through the rest of the spreadsheet?
Yes, so below that is a reallocation of existing revenue for beach projects. So the idea with this grouping, this is not currently, this would not be new revenue. So this is saying, okay, take the, and their either accommodations taxes or hospitality taxes. These are what we kind of refer to as our tourism revenue. Those come into the city, and they fund a lot of different things, including firefighters, police officers, public works. So there's a wide range of things that these revenues are covering. The idea here would be consider reallocating an additional 5% directly towards the beach, and either kind of limiting it to the beach use, or
Basically earmarking money off the top.
yeah. So again, not new revenue, but so in order to do this, whatever that 5% is on the sheet, whatever that 5% was funding already, would have to find another funding source. So it's a little bit of a shell game of moving the
And
money
is that
around.
being considered in the current budget discussion by council?
It's not,
Not
it's not.
strongly.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, some of this, I would say, I guess, does end up funding beach. Because again, this renourishment, we're gonna basically take the whole money out of most of these funds to fund it. So it does, end up there. But again, this was more of a dedicated allocation. I think we were starting to talk about that before this.
Yeah, that's correct. That
And I'm not sure why the 5% Or is that those good numbers or where they came from? It was just a,
I think it was more of an example,
Yeah.
and I think to make the case of instead of allowing them to build, and then kind of going after the balance as a transfer like we are doing for this project, instead of that, just incrementally have a basis of setting aside 5%, some percent to that fund.
It might help to give some perspective. Back at the time these were recommended, there was no, the idea was, how do we raise money? There was not a protocol, there was not something that was done in the past. So this is certainly not, and this is something for the committee to consider, it's not a limited list of things to look at and recommend or not recommend.
Right.
It's more of a starting point that we can certainly, with new minds and new eyes in it.
It would be better to have even more.
We can maybe
fresher
come up with
ideas.
more. I mean, the more we have, the better. You know, this is a perpetual problem, so if we can find a way to avoid having an emergency situation, the better we're off.
Okay. Moving down the
Yep.
list.
Next one is Wild Dunes, beach funding. This obviously is, this is not in the city's control at all, but I think they're going through, and I don't know if we know the results of their,
Yeah, 15th, I think, is the end,
Yeah.
12th or 15th is the end of voting.
so they're having that discussion about potential opportunities for them to raise their revenue. I would just say of cities' kind of importance, the sharing that was done of the beach project this time was different than prior times. The agreement was that the city would basically pay for the improvements at Wild Dunes at a ratio of 47% on the city, 53% on the Wild Dunes Community Association. And that ratio was driven by the funds generated from within Wild Dunes. So that calculation was taken in terms of how many dollars were raised into the city's tourism funds, and felt that it would be appropriate to return that same amount of money that came from Wild Dunes to projects that happen in Wild Dunes. So that's new, that had been done a little bit randomly. The sharing was based on, funds available kind of across both parties. It was historically, though, a much higher, it was a much lower contribution from the city than this go-around.
Yeah.
And the real basis for that was we had a new tax implemented, a beach preservation tax, so an additional percent, and obviously a large percentage of that, about half of that revenue, came from Wild Dunes. So there was a new funding mechanism. I think that we were hoping that new fund would completely cover all expenses, and I think Wild Dunes had the same kind of thought, that their new assessments would cover everything, and that we wouldn't be in this kind of position of being behind on funding. We can kind of Monday morning quarterback the emergency work, but that is really the $4 million roughly that went to emergency work is what upset the apple cart a bit. And again, another reason why the Foth Olson work is so important, to look at that and see if we could avoid that work in future years, because if we hadn't done that work, we'd be a lot better off financially. The next section, and this is, I would say those top three categories are kind of just existing things that we know of and are aware of. This next set is really, I would say, a kind of the creative, outside the box thinking as to what changes could happen at the state level that seem reasonable, seem approachable, but that we could potentially influence and get over a hump. And so one of those was a state beachwide renourishment fund. Currently, as I mentioned, the city has their own fund. There is not a state level renourishment fund.
I thought it was 1.5 million, is that not right?
So there is a very loose process whereby the Parks and Recreation division of the state makes budget requests. And periodically, there will be money put into the state budget, but it's very random. It's not a repetitive, defined source of revenue that just automatically goes in. It's done year by year, case by case. Some years it's $1 million, other years it'll be, I think the biggest year was 10 million. So it's a range of costs and it's very random. I think that there's currently $1.5 million in next year's budget that's being considered.
Who gets it?
And then the PRT decides who gets it. We really, I think because the Isle of Palms has been in the worst condition for the last 2 years of all of our neighbors, we have been maybe the only recipient of money from the PRT for the last couple of years. They have already dedicated, I think it's $1.5 million to this major
To this
project.
project.
Okay.
We asked for upwards of 5 million, and they've indicated that more could be coming, but they haven't been able to tell us exactly if and when and how much that additional funding would be. So we kind of always make the request, and they use those requests to inform their request to the budget, and then potentially.
And my
Get that money back.
understanding is that with the lobbyists that the city hired and recent approaches to state government, we have been making a play to now fund the state beach fund in a more significant way, and the
It's
mayor tells me it's looking better than it has ever
Yeah.
looked before. Is that right?
I think that's safe to say. Our lobbyists have always told us that it's a tough sell to the legislators from the upstate. They just have a thing, and they've been told, beach advocates, by lobbyists, by constituents, that it's an important part of the state's economy, but for whatever reason, they have not been able to kind of get there in recent years. We are hearing that there's more openness now than there historically has been. It's almost as though you kind of make the case over and over and over, and it falls on deaf ears for 10 years, but eventually they may kind of start getting on board that there's something to that argument. So that's kind of a hunch or a feeling. We don't have any concrete kind of evidence that there's a change afoot, but we do feel better about it, I think, than we have in years prior. It's always been kind of a gloomy report from our lobbyists, like don't hold your breath type report.
But even if there were a fund established of size, it still then remains to be discussed who actually gets
That's correct.
the money.
That's
There's
correct.
many beach communities that are probably interested in it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
a lot of them have federal funds too. So they might not need the money as much as
Yep.
us.
Yeah, we have kind of heard that we are the most developed non-federal beach
Local.
in the state. So we kind of have the most at stake with the least amount of help
Yeah.
And
mathematically.
the highest erosion.
And yes, that is also erosional, that's correct. Yep.
Okay.
Continuing down that list, the next one. So the next one is talking about a state code change that would be necessary that would potentially allow use of the 30% accommodations tax money to go towards beaches. Right now, that money,
Has to be used for, it was promotion.
Yeah.
Tourism promotion.
yeah, it, at the end of the day, goes to to a promotional organization. For us, it's historically been the CVB of Charleston. But the thought would be, if you don't have a beach, you don't have much to promote. So could we have a change in state law that would allow some portion of that money to go to the beach?
That's line item 36, right?
And mine doesn't have lines, but it's cap percent
Yeah,
state
yeah.
money used
Got
for.
it.
And the lobbyists are pushing for the changes, but
And have you gotten any feedback how likely that is?
Not real strong.
Yeah.
Can I suggest, like, maybe we say that we're gonna have paid parking on the island, throughout the island, unless we get some money from the county or the state? Because, these are the people who are coming and parking on our island, and maybe there's some kind of quid pro quo where we really don't want to do this, but this is the way to get a contribution from the people who are using our
But you
beach.
realize that we have paid parking to a large degree, we can increase it.
Well, all the way
And
down
then-
Palm Boulevard?
And then
there's-
Palm Boulevard, we don't
Absolutely.
have, but it's
That's
requiring,
huge.
permission.
I understand
from
that,
the
but they
Department of
said,
Transportation.
I understand that, but.
It's a
you
different
said-
department of the state,
Yeah,
so
but
it's not like.
they've been discussing paid parking on Palm Boulevard, and Douglas said that it's something that is possibly feasible, so that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So maybe we try to do that, and, because we're not getting money from the county or the state, and this is a way to share the burden.
Well, we are getting.
Is we desperately need money.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So either help us out, or we're gonna do something that
We
nobody
can make $1 million a
wants.
year on paid parking on Palm Boulevard, and,
So to kind of answer, the feedback you're going to get is we allow you to do the accommodations tax, the local options sales tax, and all this to get money from the tourist.
It's just not
So
enough.
that, it's not
That's the
enough, that's the
yeah, but
problem.
not the tourists, though. We're talking about the people from the county who come across the bridge, not the tourists who are staying here, because they're not bringing they're already taken care of. So we're talking about the people who drive their cars here and park.
Sometimes,
And
you
those
know,
are not Isle of Palm tourists.
All right, let us go through the list first before we
Yeah.
have an open debate about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
And
we-
Douglas has a few more line items here.
Yeah, so continue, well, the next one, after capping A-tax, requests specific state funds for the Alapalms. That's kind of what we've been talking about. Our lobbyists do that now, and that's ongoing and kind of always has been. An additional 1% of local accommodations tax. This is one that gets a lot of attention. This one and the one two below it of a real estate transfer fee. These are two additional funding mechanisms that the town of Hilton Head has and historically has had. So they've had this for 30 or 40 years. And so their beach preservation fund grows at twice the rate per capita that ours does because they have 2% instead of 1%. They enacted that fee, and then quickly thereafter, the state legislature changed the law and said, no other city can do that. They acknowledged that the town of Hilton Head kind of beat it, and they said, you can continue to do it, but we would not be allowed to do that under the current state law. Same thing with a real estate transfer fee. Hilton Head, that cannot go directly to the beach, but it goes to open space. And this is like the Wild Dunes transfer fee, where when you sell a house, a portion of that sale goes to a fund dedicated. At Hilton Head, again, it's for open space, but it is offsetting revenue that frees up revenue for beach maintenance for them. So
This is part of our lobbying effort right now as well.
that's correct.
And where does this stand? This
I
seems to be like real money.
Yes, yeah. I have not heard really an indication of whether this is a positive or a favorable idea or not. I haven't gotten any indication that there's movement on it, which probably tells us that it's
Not going anywhere.
not going anywhere. It never has. I know that the real estate lobby is very strong. They would be opposed to this. So that would be the challenge that we would have.
We are feeling the real estate lobby right now in Wild Dunes a little bit
Yeah.
as we are intending to raise our real estate transfer fee.
Yeah.
Just to throw it out, so be digging into it, I guess, one of the things I came across is the accommodations tax. So you have allowed a 3% by state. Problem is in Charleston County, the county already does 2, so we can only do 1. And again, there was maybe even just a different approach, but I'm not sure, again, from our perspective, how you do it, but maybe it gets back to changing state law that maybe that we would have the priority of part of that before the county takes it. And again, I don't know that we really per se get money from the county
They-
for beach, out of that money, a tax that they collect.
Yeah. So I guess to tie onto that and to go back to John's earlier point, we do get money from the state. So they would tell us, the PRT grants that you've been receiving, there's $1.5 million now, they're considering up to $5 million. They gave us a lot of money for the emergency work that was done. So I think the state would say, we do give you money, it comes through the PRT, it comes through the state budgeting. The county's defense of that they don't give money, their response will be, we actually do, we have a percent of accommodations tax that we pass a portion of that back to you. I don't have off the top of my head exactly that amount, and it's a little bit nebulous in terms of how they figure it. And there have been years that they haven't given it to us, but they do historically give us a percentage of the accommodations tax goes through them and they send it back to us. So that would be their defense. If we were to say, we get no county money, no state money, they would say, well, you do to some degree.
Okay.
This is just to understand the process.
Yeah. Next down the list, establish a municipal improvement district, and the state act is they call it the MID Act, Municipal Improvement District. This is currently already allowed at the state level, but it's only allowed for very specific uses of infrastructure. So you can do this to build a new road, build a new sewer system. The idea behind it is we talked about a flat tax across all property owners, all properties, which we can do now. This tool would be one that would allow us to do kind of a tiered tax rate, similar to what the Wild Dunes assessments were in years prior, where if you were adjacent to the beach, you got one assessment. If you were, not adjacent but close, you got a different assessment. And then if you were.
But that's not the case in Wild Dunes. The assessment is the same for every house.
It is now. It used to be that it was a tiered approach based on how close you were.
I've heard of other places that have done that.
Yeah, we don't have that mechanism now. The only way we could get it would be if the Municipal Improvement District Act was modified slightly to add beach renourishment to the list of approvable things that it could be done for. Right now, we can't do it, but
So this is another item we are working on with our lobbyists.
that's correct. Yeah.
Wasn't there somebody challenging, a city challenging that? Or did that not?
Not that I'm aware of. Could be.
Again, this was probably a year and a half ago. I thought there was some other city actually kind of trying to challenge that for beach nourishment.
I was not aware.
Somewhere anyway, it'd be
Could be.
worth looking, seeing where that stands.
If there's a
now.
challenge. Yeah, I'm not aware of that. Could be. I will say that we met with kind of the local legislators about all of this list of changes. Because that one is like 2 words of text, it's literally adding beach renourishment to an existing list. I think they felt like it would be the easiest to kind of get over the hump, and it's one that would be being put on by a city on their own residents, so it would be hard for state legislators to object to this added list. So I think they felt like that was probably the most likely to get over the hump if we wanted to, but, so that's just some context there. So that gets us out of kind of state
Yep.
code changes that could be considered. The next list is just other things that are either a resource or funding for the city to consider. Pursue Army Corps federal assistance. That's one that's a very long road ahead, and we have requests in there, and the process is we first request a study. That request, I think, is now in for its third year. And before it even gets considered, they have to do a study. A study is, and we are hearing varying degrees as to how expensive it is, but Congress has to include the cost of the study into a budget request. That has yet to be included in a federal budget yet, so it hasn't happened. So kind of step one is a study, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 6 million, and shared between federal cost and city cost. So we have been asking for that and anticipating that. And if that were to, really what they're going to do is they're going to look at a federal level at the cost benefit analysis of if it makes sense for them to spend federal dollars to protect our beaches based on, and it's property damage is the big one that they're looking at. Are we going to potentially face more federal insurance claims against us if we don't do this? So, I mean, it's way more complex than that, being that it costs $5 million, but that's the kind of thing that they're looking at.
We can talk about that later. That's a lot of control issues we're giving up also.
That's correct. There are some definite downsides to it, and even as long of a road as it is, the biggest hurdle that we consistently hear about is you have to have 100% permanent easements anywhere it happens. So,
Oh, you can kiss that goodbye.
so and a little bit of this exercise of getting easements is kind of giving us a taste of what the likelihood is, because there are communities. Edisto is in a situation where they've kind of successfully been through the process, and they are now down to only a handful of property owners. And I think Paulie's has the same situation.
I think Polly's finally cleared their last.
One, and they get down to kind of, we have three.
We're pretty good, right? I mean,
But ours are also temporary. Ours are temporary, and I will say much, and maybe not much less onerous, but they have been kind of,
ask.
Yeah.
but it's a pretty big ask. But in places like Folly Beach Folly Beach might predate the requirement for this, but Folly Beach, there's just no question that they have to have it. I mean, that community could not survive without constant federal massive projects. They couldn't make it happen. So in places where it's really, really dire, I think the property owners, it becomes obvious that they have to do something. I don't know if we would be in that category.
I'd suggest we go to the next item, because that's a whole different discussion.
Yeah.
We could go for a long time.
Right, and is it even city's council intention at this point in time to even pursue?
Well, we have been asking to be studied. So I think that council has had the opinion that it would be worth and it probably is $2 to $3 million to study it, that it would be worth city funds to know, because it is a massive insurance policy. If you were to be able to get it in place, you really don't have to renourish your beach theoretically ever again. Folly Beach will never have to pay local money to renourish their beach. So it's a big deal, but you lose a lot. To Dan's point, their tolerance, you're still hanging on for federal funding if and when they need to do a project. So Folly Beach gets.
If and when they want to, and then the north side of the beach wouldn't be covered unless there was parking issues. There's a whole lot of factors in that.
Right. Yeah, very, very complicated there.
Okay,
And the last one on the list is federal beach nourishment assistance. So this is another one where the
just
city.
like a federal fund, like a state fund.
That's correct. And we have state lobbyists, we have federal lobbyists. The federal lobbyists have made a request through Senator Graham's office to be considered for, and it's called a WARDA designation. There's an acronym for everything, but it would be akin to being a federal project, but in that situation, they, and this might be more likely, but if we were to be successfully classified as a WARDA project award, they would establish a very high-level budget, $100 million, and then the city could implement projects against that amount as the federal funds were assigned to that designation. So this is the same process that the city of Charleston is using for their barrier around the peninsula that you've heard about. That is a WARDA project. And as federal funds are designated towards that project, there is a matching component locally, and you're able to kind of stitch the
So
two funding
currently,
sources
there
together.
is a federal fund that helps with protecting beaches. We just don't have access to it. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct. Yeah, it's, and I don't know that any other local communities have tapped into it for beach renourishment. I think it's more traditional kind of flood protection, like the seawall around Charleston. It also can be used for water, wastewater, kind of any water-related uses, which is the way that it's been presented to our lobbyists, to group our sewer project in with drainage, with beach protection, and a kind of resilience request
Do
to
you
them.
think that rather than beach renourishment, that the building of hot structures on the beach could be federally funded?
Yeah, that, I don't know. Don't know the answer to that. Haven't asked that question. I think this is another one that there's a lot more to learn about it. It's a thing that our federal lobbyists are pursuing. They've let us know that they're pursuing it. I think they feel better than the other kind of things on the list of potential funding options, but in terms of the real nitty-gritty detail as to how that would work out, I don't think we have that level of information yet. But I think be a good question
Would
to
it
ask.
be inappropriate for this committee to ask to have our state and federal lobbyists come to our next meeting and talk to us about
Yeah, I think-
those line items?
I think that would be fine.
I'm just interested in it because they are so much bigger than all the other local line items, right? So any of those is a game changer as opposed to even doubling the parking fees, right?
Right.
Even
Yeah.
though I'm not against it, but it's pocket change in comparison. So true.
No, it is big.
I can make that, I'll make that request to them.
Yeah, that would be very good, I think. So that's the end of this list.
Yep,
And all new ideas that city council may have debated, you already incorporated in your discussion, right? That
I
was
believe
number
so,
one.
yeah.
So Deepa, can I just hand something out for next
Well,
week?
we're not done with this topic yet. I'm right now interested in your opinions of, what of those line items attracted your attention? What of those line items do you want to know more about? What of those line items do you think the city should for sure pursue? And I already know, John, where you stand in terms of parking.
It'd be a pain in the butt to administer that. I'm not, but maybe that,
So do you have
adding
any-
beach nourishment to the
To the
language,
the mid-act.
Yeah, I mean, that seems.
So that would be a good one to talk to our lobbyists
Yeah,
about,
I
if
think
we have them.
they
Yeah.
probably can talk very intelligently about all of those 5, 6,
Yeah.
7 line items. Is there a city council member or several that are specifically dealing with the lobbyist, or how does this actually work?
No, so the lobbyists report to full council periodically. you know,
Yeah, I
not-
saw
not
him when
reg-
he came last,
Yeah.
it was a few months ago.
Yep, the city council develops a list of priorities, basically annually. That list of priorities is sent to them, and then they kind of go and do their work on the city's behalf. There's not really a designated council person that follows up with them. We stay in contact with them about it. They give us occasional
You add that to
legislative.
your 101 responsibilities.
And I do think council members, interact with them on occasion. They'll be up in Columbia, they'll stop by, but it's not a formalized designated
just as an aside, it's 10:30. I know we had talked about finishing at 10.
Yep.
I don't want to mess up our quorum, but I've got to get moving in a moment. so-
We are intending to leave here very
Okay.
soon. Okay. Any other comments on one of those line items? At the moment, we're gonna
No.
obviously put it back on the agenda next meeting.
Yeah, those are very interesting.
Okay.
And any new ones that you can think of.
Well, that's the homework
that's
for the
chat.
beach committee members, to come back with fresh ideas for the next meeting. Okay. Well, then we are closing out this topic, which brings us to, John, your discussion
just
about you
very-
wanted to raise some issues
very
that we may
quick.
want to consider for the next meeting?
Yeah, I just want to hand this out to you. I think it ties in nicely to the Foth Olson discussion we had today, and we'll see them next month. Wendy put me on to this, and as I was reading it yesterday, I was so impressed with this. This is the beach monitoring report for Hilton Head. I just grabbed the 2022 one.
It's by Foth Olson, by who?
Yes, and I was comparing it to the ones that we get, which I find very hard to comprehend. So I wanted to, I know this is a reading assignment, but if you could please, there's even an executive summary, 5-page, which
Okay.
our report doesn't have. You have to read the whole thing. But just imagine if we had a report like this. Here's an extra one.
You have it electronically?
Yes, I do. I can,
Send-
should I? email
Yeah, if you don't
that to
mind
you?
sending it to
Yeah.
me, it'd be great.
Here, sorry, Dylan. I was just thinking how wonderful this report was, and maybe at next meeting, we could discuss asking for our monitoring reports to,
We have an ongoing
Like
contract with
this.
CSE to do our beach monitoring reporting, right?
Yes,
Douglas?
yes, and I think it was a 5-year term, and there's some amount through that. But yes, there is an existing agreement to go through some term that I can report back
yeah.
on.
Yeah, but it doesn't specify exactly how the report has to look like, right?
That's correct.
So if
Well,
we
they-
had certain requests on
Yes,
what to report out,
absolutely.
that is
Yeah.
possible.
Just look at it side by side, and it just made me mad. I got angry.
that's
That we're
noted.
putting up with this, so.
So we have then our next meeting on June 4th, is that correct?
Yes,
9 o'clock, and we have, as I can see so far, Douglas, 3 agenda items that we want to discuss. One is Foth Olson again,
Yep.
coming back. Then we're gonna talk again about financing for the beaches, including a discussion with the lobbyist.
would, to be respectful of their time, if you, and I guess I would either like to be able to schedule them for a window, that they're not waiting, that we don't have
Right.
Thorn Run waiting for Chris Creed to end. Could I suggest you either do one at a time? In other words, spread them out over a few meetings to put them all at the beginning, or that you have hard time limits for each. But it is
I'm
agitating.
willing to manage time and invite the lobbyist for 10 o'clock sharp.
10 for the, so you got two, do you want to, but you want to ask for both, correct?
Fourth,
State?
no,
And federal
just
lobbyists?
the state
Just
lobbyist
state,
for this
okay.
meeting. We do the federal one next week.
Why don't we start at 8:30 again if we can? Seems to make sense.
You like the 8:31?
It just gives us more
Okay for
time
you?
without being rushed.
Is that possible
Yeah.
to start
Yeah.
at 8:30?
It actually works well for us.
Okay. Then we do Foth Olson at 8:30,
8:30.
and at 9:30 we do the state lobbyist.
State lobbyists, gotcha.
Yeah.
We had also, Wendy had asked to talk about, with Nicole Elko about.
That's the third item, thank you, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's the third item on the agenda.
What time you want her? If we do state at 9:30, 10
10,
for Nicole,
yeah,
is that good?
yeah.
And then,
If you
So
have to
that-
leave early, you have to leave early.
Sure.
We're talking about fences and vegetation on the dunes.
and then we can talk about the monitoring report
I think we
format.
talk about that maybe as part of the Foth Olson discussion.
Okay,
yeah,
like-
Because
so-
it's a
And-
Foth
and-
Olson
and maybe-
document.
Maybe the idea is we do have these segments laid out, so because we need enough time to get through it.
Yeah.
all, and it'll help them in coordinating with us, so I like that idea.
Okay. Then if there's no further business,
So motion to adjourn.
Second?
second. Aye.
Aye.